In this video, we're going to configure our site. I'll give you some details about installing the Learning PHP examples, as well as the PHP MyAdmin. Now, we already went over how to install certain pieces of the equation here in the Windows and the Mac videos. Now, the Mac users are going to also want to watch this video even though it's on the PC platform. I gave you a lot of details about installing all the different pieces, MySQL, PHP MyAdmin, and the Apache server. Now what you want to do is you want to actually keep an eye on the MAMP server that I was mentioning in the software you need. This is still in beta and it's going to make things very easy like we have here with the WAMP server. I also recommend using the WAMP server because it's going to actually install everything for you very nicely. You don't have to actually worry about installing Apache separately, MySQL separately, and then PHP MyAdmin as well. Now, WAMP server is just an installation program. These pieces of the equation, these different software packages, they're all open source, and this WAMP server actually just installs things very nicely for you. As you can see, we're in the C program_files WAMP folder. If you actually installed it as I recommended on the Windows platform, then you're going to see this particular directory and this listing of files here in folders. Now on the Mac, it will look differently if you install your Apache server. Check out that documents folder as I mentioned, and take one of the two roads to actually placing your Learning PHP examples and the PHP MyAdmin folders into your Apache Web Server Documents folder or into your username and then the Sites folder. And I'll show you those paths now in the Dreamweaver interface. But the first thing you need to do is locate where you're going to put those files. We're just going to copy files into this particular folder structure here. You can see this is the www folder here for WAMP. This contains the site files, the document root, and you'll have folders here already installed for you. If you're bringing in PHP MyAdmin into your Apache document root folder because you have Apache installed yourself outside of WAMP server, then just drag that PHP MyAdmin folder right in the www, which is your document root. It could have a different name, but here this is where we're going to drag it. Now we'll just take a peek at our desktop here. You see that we have the PHP MyAdmin folder here, and then also the Learning PHP folder that contains all the files. Everything after you unzip the files or decompress the files, they're all located in there. And then PHP MyAdmin, these are all the PHP MyAdmin files and folders that are going to control this whole application. Alright, so you just grab these folders and then drag them into the document root folder if it's not there already. We'll cancel that. And then the second folder you want to bring in are the examples. So we'll just go back and we can just drag this in. We'll hold down the control key here on the PC so we can copy it. Maybe you want to do that on the Mac too as well. Just copy those files there. Now, you can do things in one of two different ways. You can copy the whole folder here, or you can actually just place the individual files into this folder structure. If you did that, you'll have less flexibility, but it might be a little bit easier for you to set up. But then again, it might not. So it's up to you to decide on which way you want to go. If I were you, I would do it this way. That way you can actually make a copy of this folder. And then you can have two examples here. One that you can play with and manipulate, and then one you can just reference. So you don't actually make any changes there. Now if you take the approach, I have a couple of other folders here. If you take the approach that you're going to put these files directly into your folder structure, you're going to see all of these files here that are part of the Learning PHP folder structure, and the additional folders are going to be there as well. And it's going to be a little bit cluttered there, but it might be easier depending on your experience. So these would be the folders that you're adding. And now you can see it does get a little bit confusing because if you go to delete them, you have extra folders there. So that will make that a little bit harder to manage, but it's up to you. As you can see, this is just the Learning PHP folder in a sudo document root folder just as an example to show you what it would look like. And that would look just like this here. So you have extra folders in there. So now we just need to go through the motions of setting things up. We don't have to actually take advantage of the HTTP config file for Apache. We can just use this as is. This folder's already copied there. Now we can take a look in the browser. As you can see here, we just have localhost. Localhost points to your machine. There are two different ways that you can get to the localhost. Either type in localhost or type in 127.0.0.1 and that should reach the same localhost. This is just an index page that's placed into that document root folder, and this is for WAMP server if you have that installed, and I strongly recommend that you do that. Now you can see you can reach PHPMyAdmin from here by clicking on the link, and you can also see that you have two different project folders below here. Learning PHP is what we have to look at here, and you can see everything's working so far. This is how you would access that. Either the 127.0.0.1 or localhost. Localhost is just pointing to your local machine. So now Learning PHP is its own folder there. If you didn't install it in its own folder, you're going to see it similar to how I have in the examples that you're going to see forward. I use my IP address there specifically instead of localhost. I have many different websites on my machine, and then I don't have a further nested folder here, learning_PHP. This is something that you need to add there, so don't get confused by what it looks like on top of my browser window there. This is a nicer way to do it. If you did it by placing all those files into the folder, then you would just use localhost and you would see the same thing here. So one of those two different ways to use it. Now, when you move along, you're going to want to take a look at the PHPMyAdmin. And we'll just bring that up here, and I'll just copy that. We're going to need to set up some things here with this particular installation of these files. These are just PHP files that actually access MySQL databases, and they allow you to administer your MySQL databases. You can do a lot of different things here. Really adds a lot of functionality, but it really is just a PHP web application. But we'll set that up in a little bit. We'll also set up things in the MySQL section, the first video of the MySQL section, and you're really going to have to go over there and check out that later section and set things up further from there. This is just to get you started. Alright, so we have our address here. You can see that you can browse through most of the different examples here. When you get down to the database section, you might see access denied, you might have some errors here that are popping up. That's because we didn't set up our database and we didn't set up PHPMyAdmin. So that's what we need to do. But you can access things up to that point, up to the point that you start to work with the databases and these other two sections down below. So you're going to want to do that before you get really into all the different sections here. Some of them will work. These two here won't without the database. So you can start on the beginning sections and continue, and then when you get to the database section, you can actually configure PHPMyAdmin a little bit better there. But if you want to see all the examples, then go ahead and configure the database and the PHPMyAdmin, and then you can take a look at all the different examples that we have here. Okay, so let's do that. Let's configure PHPMyAdmin a little bit here, just to go over a couple of things, and then we can continue. On the bottom, it's telling us that our root password isn't set. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to do that later. But we're going to take a peek at the configuration file, just so you know what to do, where to look, and then later on we're going to go over that as well. I'll let you know what you need to set, and then we're going to actually demonstrate that. So in Dreamweaver, we're going to open up a file called config.inc.php. And if we look in the folder structure, within the www folder, within our WAMP folder, or this is where your documents are going to be, find that PHPMyAdmin folder, and then you're going to find that config file, and this is the file. On the Mac, you're going to find that within the PHPMyAdmin folder because it's the same folder. Within that file, you're going to look at a couple of different things. The first thing that could be set automatically is PMA absolute URI. This is going to help PHP MyAdmin manage your databases. It's going to want to understand where it is exactly, and this is the path that you need to give it. This is if you're working on your local host. Otherwise, you would have to give the full path to wherever your installation of PHP MyAdmin. If it's remote, you would have to put in your full server name here. And you can read the PHP MyAdmin documentation, but this is basically where it's telling you to point it to. Your web, whatever that is, and then the path to PHP MyAdmin directory. And you can see it might auto-detect it, and then localhost /PHP MyAdmin / could be placed within there. That's the first step. But it could just auto-detect it. On my machine, it did auto-detect it. Your host normally is going to be localhost. Most of the time, you're going to have your MySQL database on the local machine, but you could put your IP address here as well. Now, if it's a different port other than the standard port, you might need to change that, but normally you would stick with the defaults there as well. And then further down, you're going to see root. That's the root account for MySQL. And the password here would be set based on what you're going to change later. And then everything should work fine for you. I'm going to show you later what you can do from a fresh install, of course, but if you're using this and it's not a fresh install, you're actually adding a couple of things with PHP MyAdmin, then this is the area that you're going to worry about. You don't have to worry about config at the moment. Just understand that the root admin needs to have his password changed later. Right now we can access it because our password hasn't been set. And as you can see here, the root right within our PHP MyAdmin doesn't have a password set, and we'll do that later. You'll start from the home here, this little home link, and then you can go into privileges and see that. Also, you can get help here with the question mark, and this is going to give you some very important details that you're going to want to take a look at. MySQL isn't necessarily easy. I would say it's very unforgiving as well. So we do get you started so that you can actually see things and take a look at the examples and move forward in the training. But at the same time, you don't want to take SQL lightly. You want to read the documentation, learn as much as you can about it, and that way you can take advantage of it. Try not to do too many different things within the interface here that might lead you to mess up a database or two, because some databases are very important. Like the MySQL database, I'd stay out of that. And PHP MyAdmin, I'd stay out of that as well. We'll show you how to create the samples database, and we'll do that later. Now on the Mac, we can close that. On the Mac, like I said, the directory that we're going to find the tilde and your username folder, as I mentioned, is going to be users, your username, sites, and then learning PHP is where you would place that folder. And PHP MyAdmin would also be there as well. So this is where you're going to place those two folders. Same thing with the local host that's not your tilde username, as I mentioned in those Mac videos. You're going to place them in the documents folder, and like I said, make a copy of that. And then you'll place your learning PHP folder there and the PHP MyAdmin as well. So that's going to get you started. You're going to be able to access everything here, and like I said, check out those later videos and you're going to see how you can actually take advantage of the Learning PHP examples up to the point of the databases. Now additionally, because we're talking about WAMP Server a little bit more, you may find the need to uninstall WAMP Server, and you can find that right here. Everything's going to be uninstalled off of your system. Be careful if you have additional Apache and MySQL databases already there, but this is going to clean up this folder, and it won't delete everything here. You'll see MySQL will still be there if you have data in the database, but that's how you can uninstall that. So that should get you started. Like I said, keep in mind the local host. That's important. And try to use the folder structure that I mentioned here. Like I said, I give you the option of just putting your folder in there, and this is the best option, and then you can actually access the learning _PHP2 and see that this is going to point to the same files. And you should be set up quite nicely.